I don't think an introduction is needed here after that session we just had. You mentioned coming back from New York. You were at Advertising Week. Do you have a highlight or a story or a speaker, anything to share from the week in New York?
I thought you were going to ask me about the fact that I just brought a pizza home. I did.
Or, okay, where did you get
Oh, Joe's.
Joe?
Joe's on Carmine. Every single time. I bring a pizza home every single time. I just forgot my Tupperware this time, so I was like searching all the CVS's, and they were all this big, so it was plastic bags. So I moderated a panel out there called Trends, Technology, and Tactics. Had some incredible panelists, QuantCast, GWI, the Mars Agency, and just listening to the volume of data that's available to us. At Week in Brand Innovators, there was definitely a lot of talk about AI. I used ChatGPT to get my beginning questions because you have to for that kind of panel. I think a lot of the takeaways were just about data is increasing and how do we use it intelligently. Something I really liked from one of the panelists was just about how the fact that if we use technology, we use AI correctly, it frees us up to do the strategic work and not the manual work. And it's not taking people's jobs. With ChatGPT, all of us, it took off super fast. That was the thing that surprised me. I call myself a second round early adopter because I don't want Apple, not to dig on Apple, but when they push out updates, I never want I don't want to ever be the first round. I want somebody else to get the bugs, and then I'll take the second one when they've figured it out, which is just true of all companies. But I really liked that. It frees us up to do strategy. ChatGPT is very, very helpful if you know how to use it the right way. But if you do know how to use technology the right way, it allows us to, in advertising as an example, quickly do multivariate testing, A/B testing, where you don't always need as much of a human touch, but it can sub out language that you may be predisposed to, et cetera. So it was really hard. We've talked about data for so long, but generative, AI is where all of a sudden there is actual intelligence and application, curving up like this. It's a hockey stick.
Don't worry, folks. I'm definitely going to be asking Alison about ChatGPT in the Visa business context. It's on the list. But Joe's Pizza, okay, I like that. Yeah.
So good, guys. I was on the subway because it was going to be faster with this enormous box, and I had so many looks, and I was like, what are you going to do? I told them if the subway, if our train, if we had a problem, I could feed everybody. And they were like, oh yeah, by all means.
Yeah. All right, let's get to know you real quick before we get into some of the heavy-hitting business questions. We'll do a quick rapid fire. Do you have a favorite season?
Not summer in Austin.
I live in New Jersey. This feels like summer to me right now. It's going to be 92 today.
When I got to New York on Sunday, and then I'm a distance runner. Monday I went running, and it felt glorious. It felt like heaven. It was so crisp and lovely. Yesterday, I was supposed to run, I think 5 miles. I went up towards Central Park, and I just kept going. And had I not had, something to attend, I would have kept going. So I ended up doing 8.5 because it just felt magical. So I don't know if I have one favorite season. I do love spring where they have cherry blossoms. So Salt Lake City in April is gorgeous. And then I do love the changing of the leaves in the fall. So it's just not summer in Austin. It's horrific.
New York in October. Speaking of running, do you have a favorite marathon? I think you have a marathon coming up, if I'm not mistaken.
I got the New York Marathon. I'm going to be back in New York in a couple of weeks. I am very excited about it. I'm looking forward to New York. I loved Chicago just because, and I imagine New York is going to be very similar. I did the Austin half back in, I think, February. It's just as you go through neighborhoods, and it's what I think is so magical about New York and Chicago. You get to go through all of these different cultural hubs, experience the music, the people. I always love the food, but I'm probably not going to be stopping along the way for that. But I mean, Chicago, just the energy of it is amazing. So, and New York, I'll report back on, but I imagine it's going to be equally amazing. And I asked somebody that, on our prep call about the elevation, because I'm always like, okay, am I gonna be doing this at some point? Am I gonna be pulling to Boston on Heartbreak Hill? The elevation looked okay, just some bridges.
You'll be ready for more pizza at the end of that one.
I maced the marathon, they gave us pepperoni pizza after the race, and I wasn't really a pepperoni fan, but you need salt after running that long. It's the best thing I've ever tasted, and now I'm a pepperoni person.
Yeah, I could go for that as well. But as I mentioned to you, I'm just going to be watching, maybe having some pizza and beer during that, while you're running by. All right, we're here to talk about marketing innovation. So just last sort of personal fun question. Do you have a favorite ad campaign? It can't be Visa, but a favorite ad campaign and why?
So I love Nike, which I think is a relatively common answer. And I love Nike for different reasons. I was thinking about it last night. I grew up quite a bit of my growing up. I moved around. I lived in Oregon for quite a while. I'm a runner. And so Nike was originally a running company. It was a new thing to have waffle bottom that was very innovative at the time. And I wouldn't consider them to be a running company anymore. They've expanded into so many different types of sports. I love that they have tried to evolve over time. And so it's embracing body positivity as an example. They've screwed up sometimes, they had a female athlete they were sponsoring, she was pregnant, sponsorship changed. And so I like that they learn as they go. I don't know that I have a very specific ad campaign, but I just think they are amazing marketers. I believe they do their best to be authentic, and their slogan is brilliant. It really, just do it, because it cuts to the chase of, when I run, I have a mantra that I learned from Runner's World, the magazine 20 years ago. I've come up with my own, but I just remember it was, I am a runner, I'm getting stronger. And you say it as you're hitting the pavement in rhythm, and just do it can be applied to so many different things. It's brilliant, it's timeless. So I just think Nike is fabulous.
Yeah, I agree. I read Shoe Dog during it was a COVID read. It's just cool to hear about the whole story. All right, let's pivot. Let's talk about your brand. One of the things you had mentioned to me is that Visa, one of the challenges is that consumers think of Visa as a credit card company, and you're not a credit card company, but your brand is on tens of millions of credit cards, right? So I know a couple of years ago you relaunched your brand identity with an initiative called Meet Visa, which is about economic inclusion. Can you talk to us a little bit about the relaunch and how that's been going?
Almost every single time. Actually, I was speaking at an event, and the moderator, we didn't have a chance to meet very much in advance. I can't remember the why, but literally we synced right before, and she was asking me credit card questions, and I was like, oh crap. I can navigate it, but so Visa's not a credit card company. Our logo shows up on a lot of credit cards. We're a technology company, so we are fintech. We do the connectivity behind everything. We're the way that what we call issuers and acquiring banks. So issuers, they're the ones that are actually giving you your credit card. So Chase, Bank of America, those guys, they might be an issuer. And then you have acquirers, you have the banks that are where businesses are collecting their money from. So we are the connectivity. We make everybody talk to each other. We help businesses accept payments. We help them prevent fraud, which also goes along with the AI, ML, reads the data. We have 150 billion plus data points, which is pretty freaking amazing. You also should feel very good about Visa because it's the most secure company I've ever worked for. It can be really hard to get vendors onboarded because it's so hard, but we have literal military grade data centers. I don't know, I worked for Dell, Dell's amazing, but Visa absolutely trumps any company I know in terms of security. But yeah, in terms of the brand initiative, it really is, we have a long ways to go, I think, around the fact that everyday people don't necessarily know that we're not a credit card company, and we have to educate both consumers to feel an affinity for a very iconic brand and to continue to stay relevant as we tap to pay and where a physical payment device looks different. How we show up in stores, And then on the B2B side, how do we find a way, actually just had a discussion while I was in New York on this, with our CMO, which just, do we do branded house, do we do house of brands? There's always that discussion within the brand world of, is everything Visa, or as we have acquisitions or different arms of the business, do they maintain their own brand? So like again, on the B2B side, I'm a consumer, I'm also B2B. Like I'm all the things, right? Ultimately, I'm selling to a human being. I need the human being, the consumer level to understand what we do because they might be a buyer, they might be a business owner, small business, enterprise business, and I need them to understand that Visa also can help them in their pursuit. So we have to, it's gonna be a long road, I think, to help educate that, especially as payments evolves. But yeah, it is, we freshened the look, we're working to tell our story. I think it'll be, like I said, a while. And then it really is also about accessibility, which I'm passionate about because we have the ability and responsibility as a large company to make money accessible to people, and that even goes to, like somebody with a tuk-tuk in Indonesia. Somebody to be able to accept payments in a way they never accepted payments, but having inclusivity and accessibility to money around the world can change the dynamics hugely.
And wow, can you talk about the differences on the B2C and the B2B side when it comes to accessibility and what that looks like? Or is it one and the same?
They're really interconnected is ultimately it, right? Because as consumers, it's amazing, like in Africa, payments looks very different than it does in Europe. Like Europe, your standard is tap to pay. In some African countries, you actually use SMS. So it looks very different depending on where you're at, but we have to consider the technology that is available in specific countries and what consumers have access to, and then how we equip businesses to be able to offer whatever preferred payment. Actually, at my beloved Joe's, they only accept cash, which I mostly don't carry anymore because who wants to? They have an ATM right there, so they also think around they don't want to pay the processing fee, so here's cash instead, which then they're gonna pay the ATM fee. That person's gonna pay the ATM fee. It's gonna happen one way or the other. But I think it's intertwined, and it is about understanding what access to technology consumers have, what access to technology to B2B companies have, and consumer experience is everything.
So that's a good segue. Let's talk about technology and specifically AI and ChatGPT. Just before you mentioned how secure Visa is, it's the most secure company you've ever worked at. What is that? I know that the ChatGPT in the context of how you use it at Visa is internal. Can you tell us a little bit about that tool and just your security overall?
So ChatGPT, like I said, it just took off like wildfire. Again, second wave of early adopters. When it first happened, I was like, what's this? Like AI ML has been around forever. But I had coworkers who were moving quickly. I had a friend from Microsoft who actually became a prompt engineer. Like months ago, maybe 6 months ago. So like that quickly the industry was moving. So companies are seeing that their employees are using ChatGPT, and if you really dig in, you find out, when you start using ChatGPT, the way it's getting smarter is by all the questions that you're asking it. And when you get answers, then you ask clarifying questions. And it's learning and getting smarter. Well, guess what? That means you're exposing everything you're asking, everything you're telling it, and it's getting smarter. So like if I'm asking a question, now my answer affects somebody else in the world. So companies, if they realize that, they realize employees might be putting something proprietary into ChatGPT. They might be asking, actually I didn't even, because it's not my world as much, but in my panel in New York, they were talking to, one of the guys was talking about his brother who puts code into ChatGPT. And I was like, I'm thinking copy. Like I'm not even thinking in that world, but so Visa saw this happening and they quickly they locked down, so there's a version we have, it is ChatGPT, but it maintains security privacy so that we're keeping proprietary information within our world and we still own it. Nobody else is getting access to it. Excuse me. And like, I think we just have to consider safe ways to use ChatGPT and also the consequences and lack of guardrails today. Artists who are using it, they may not actually own their art after they're done, if they're using ChatGPT to modify it. So like there's all these things we have to consider. But Visa, like they saw both the incredible adoption of ChatGPT. So rather than just shutting it down and not creating a place where employees might try to be sneaky, because it'll happen inevitably, they made it safe. And they helped us to use a tool, a really smart tool, to make our work better.
Are there any use cases you're able to speak to just around like how people are using it across the company, and then what kind of checks and balances are in place to make sure that things are secure if you're able to speak to it? Just curious.
I am not on the technology side, so I'm sure there's all sorts of nerdy things that I didn't go to school for that happen. So in my, on my side of the fence, I had an invite for VIP dinner that needed to be written, and it was, probably like 6 o'clock at night or something, and I didn't want to bother somebody, I just wanted to get it out. So rather than having a copywriter, I was like, oh, I used to be an editor, I can do this, no problem. And I had writer's block. It's just not for the life of me think. So I used ChatGPT, I put in the basic information, it spit out an invite. Please don't use whatever it spits out for several reasons. One of the panelists talked about how somebody applied for a job that he was hiring, and the cover letter very clearly was ChatGPT, and they hadn't done any editing. Like it was obvious. He's like, I did not bother. And then we laughed of like, if the letter begins with, I hope this finds you well, it might have come from ChatGPT. So, like we've been using it for blog posts, we've been using it to think through campaign ideas. I did use it for that invite, but I refined it to be human. And that's where ChatGPT is not taking anybody's jobs. It's freeing us up to be more strategic. It's allowing us to have bigger ideas. Again, because it's actually diverse perspectives that are coming in and teaching the tool, then that allows us to benefit from diverse perspectives. It also means we have to make sure there's no biases coming through, so we need to watch for that. But that's how we're using it. And actually, Visa not only recognized that employees were going to be adopting it one way or the other, so they created a secure version, they actually promoted it internally. They put it on our intranet, and then they were incentivizing, like contest-wise of using it. So full adoption.
That's a really good example, and it's a good segue into personalization. I know at Yelp that we're using it to ensure that consumers that are looking for things, like you and I might be in New York, you might be looking, we might know that you're really into pizza and I might be into burgers, and like based on what people are searching for, we're using AI in a way to just make things personalized based on that experience. As it relates to advertising, we were talking a little bit about gone are the days of marketers just wanting to target women 25 to 54. We have so much data at our disposal to make things better in terms of how we're targeting and connecting with consumers. Can you speak a little bit about how Visa is approaching personalization as it relates to your marketing efforts?
That's a great question. So I have a pet peeve, which is being put into a category of what my age is, my gender, my ethnicity, whether I have children or not. I don't like it. I realize as marketers we many times do persona work, and I think that's still okay if you want to put kind of a general face to a name, but there's way too much data out there for us to be doing that. You can do segmentation, which allows personalization. It's what we expect. I don't like being categorized. I don't like being stuck into a bucket, because your bucket's going to be freaking wrong. It's just, I will eat all of the things as I'm hungry all the time because I run a lot. Yeah, I have kids, but what I look for is maybe not different, is perhaps different than somebody else. My husband's a stay-at-home dad. Our life is not the typical, which, what was at some point the typical. So personalization and segmentation is really critical, and the reams of data allow for that. I love in terms of how Yelp is serving it up, and it served me well while I was in New York, and I left a Yelp review. I used to be Yelp Elite. You know what? It was a nail salon. And I was just trying to find one, and I felt bad because they got me right in, no problem, it was empty, it was the only one there the whole time, and I just thought, oh my gosh, I want this business to be successful. So I'm gonna go leave them Yelp review, because ratings and reviews are what we live and die by, which you also have to be careful with, and I believe Yelp is addressing this as well, to make sure you don't have bots, you don't have all this massive reviews. Amazon, I doubt. I read the reviews to see, like, do I believe these are real people? Because it's a thing, it's a real problem. You know, in terms of how we do it at Visa, it is looking at, again, we have over 150 billion data points that we can look at. We can see your purchase trends. It's all anonymized, we can't, tie it back to the exact person, but things can be tokenized. Businesses can choose to use something called tokens, and that means when I use my credit card, my number is actually turned into a different number. And merchants, businesses can follow that number along and start to stitch together data of offline experiences, online experiences, and then get to know you better so that you're served up the stuff you actually do care about, which is why Instagram and TikTok serve me up a lot of running content, and I'm not allowed to be on TikTok anymore because I have zero self-control. It's really, I'm no joke, like my husband was gone for a month over 2 summers ago, and I was up till like 2 a.m. on a regular basis. I was like, oh, this is a serotonin problem, just sleep.
Yeah, I mean, the number of requests I get from my kids for additional screen time on TikTok. Thanks to the great people at Apple, you can control this a little bit, but it's a problem. All right, so last question here. You're coming off this really great week, an advertising week in New York and other brand innovator sessions. What excites you about the future of our industry? If there's one thing.
I am naturally curious, and if you've ever done the Clifton Strengths Finders, I am strategic, analytical, ideator, achiever, and learner. So I'm constantly hungry for knowledge, and I like surrounding myself with really smart people. I recognize I will never have to be the smartest person in the room with all things, because I find those people. The future, what's exciting to me is that we're going to be able to keep getting smarter and have the ability to ask different questions. And at the same time of marrying the data, I studied psychology as one of my subjects as my undergrad. The humanity, we have to make sure it still exists. We have to make sure we balance the ability to have so much data and the application of it. First of all, make sure there's checks and balances so that it is real data. It's not being fudged, it's not being manipulated. Again, we remove as much as we can bias or prejudice, but it's making sure that humanity still exists and that we take our life experiences and we're applying it to be better marketing and to learning from the things we might never have thought of. And again, diverse perspectives in the room. Because, like I mentioned my pregnancy example, all the other men, I was the only woman, all the men in the room had never experienced pregnancy. They didn't know what it was like. Nike with this female athlete, who was pregnant, not everybody, they're not, most of the people at Nike are not professional athletes. So they hadn't thought through, as many times we just haven't thought through best intentions, but for me, it's exciting that we have so much data and we can get smarter and we don't have to do the bucket game anymore. Like here's Alison Herzog, she's 42, she has 3 children, she's probably a stay-at-home mom, but no, I'm not, I'm not all those things, I'm a bunch of other things. I became a long-distance runner actually later in life, COVID, thank you COVID. I did it in my 20s and then I paused for, 15 years, and so I just am grateful to not be in a bucket anymore and to be able to use data to get smarter and then balance it with humanity.
Smarter, more secure. All right, Alison, thanks a lot. Really appreciate it. I think the next session is going to start.